Okay. Hello and welcome to this FMB members webinar, which has been recorded on Tuesday, 7th of July 2020. I hope everyone watching is well, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. So we'll follow our normal format for this session, which is the webinar should take around 40 to 45 minutes. You can ask questions of either of our speakers at any point during the webinar using the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We'll save the questions for towards the end of the session. And you will receive a follow-up email probably about 24 hours from now with a link to the recording of the webinar, and any information that we refer to during the session will be included in that follow-up email. So there's no need for you to note everything down as we go along. There's quite a lot to cover in this topic. It's a big topic, cybercrime and insurance against cybercrime. So we'll really just be scratching the surface today, but hopefully you will go away with some ideas about further areas to research and some further information from us to follow up on. So we've got two speakers joining us today. We've got Graham Harrop, who is a senior underwriter at HSB Insurance, who are specialist insurers in the technical and engineering market, and have been around for 150 years, obviously not insuring against cybercrime for all of that time. And our other speaker is Phil Morgan, who's a tech entrepreneur and investor who started his first business when he was only 19, but since 2015 he's been focused on artificial intelligence and cybersecurity through his business, cynext.co.uk, and again the link to that will be in the follow-up email. And Phil has been recognised as one of the top 50 tech execs in the UK by PCR magazine. You'll be able to find out more about him at his personal website, which we will send out in the follow-up email as well. And I want to say a special thank you to both of our speakers today, because Phil has stepped in to the breach at the last minute because another speaker wasn't able to make it. So really grateful to him for that. And also I think Graham was volunteered to do this whilst he was away on holiday by his colleagues, which seems a little underhand. But thank you to both of you for sharing your expertise with us today. Before I hand over to Phil for his presentation, I'd like to just ask you to answer a question about whether you yourself have had any experience of cybercrime of any kind. You should be able to see that on the screen now. And if you could just answer whether, yes, you have been a victim of cybercrime or not, then I'll share the results with everybody once you've completed that. I'll just give you a few seconds to complete that. Okay, so that's showing that most of you here have been a victim of cybercrime, which is hardly surprising because I guess that's what has prompted you to attend today. I hope you can now see the poll results that 71% of people attending today have been a victim of cybercrime in the past, which is a sobering thought really, isn't it? So I'm going to take that off the screen, and without further ado, I'm now going to hand over to our first speaker, who is Phil Morgan. Over to you, Phil.
Thank you, Hayley. Good afternoon, everyone. And look, all of you are running businesses and are very, very busy. So on behalf of the FMB, Node IT and Graham, who you'll hear from shortly, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. We value your time, so we want to make it as profitable as we can for you. The second thing, as Hayley has already said, I'm extending the apologies of one of the industry's leading lights, and that is Lee Wood, who is the CEO of Node IT. And they're a great, great company, and they're privileged to be working with the FMB and maybe some of you as customers. So can I say something from the get-go this evening as we share some time together? Me talking to you about cybersecurity is very much like you coming to me and talking about selecting a contractor to maybe build my conservatory for me. So a lot of the things that myself and specifically the detail that Graham is going to go into shortly are going to maybe seem to you quite complicated, but to us they're simple. Now, to be clear, I can't tell the difference between a 6-foot wall, a dwarf wall, a school wall. All walls are the same to me. And I've always found it challenging in selecting a contractor. And I've got to be honest, I've been ripped off a few times where I've used a dodgy builder or used somebody that says that they can do something, but they can't. And so I rely on organizations like the Federation of Master Builders and others to help me select the right companies to look after me when it comes to construction. And in a similar way, I would give you one piece of advice today. Make sure that you pick an IT contractor or a cyber security contractor that knows what they're doing. I want to highlight two numbers for you, if I may. The first number is 16,200. That's how many individual IT support companies there are across the UK and Ireland. All of those vary in size, from the likes of maybe BT or Virgin Media that you will know that offer managed services at the higher end of the scale, all the way down to people that we affectionately call Ponytail Pete, that are maybe a one-man band that maybe has a little van in his garage and operates on a one-man band basis. But you need to be assured that companies like Node IT and 222 other businesses in the UK are the leading lights in cybersecurity. And the reason I say that for you is that there is a scheme called the Cyber Essentials Scheme. And that scheme answers 27 fundamental questions about how you and your team in business use technology that I'm going to talk to you about in a moment. And Graham is going to go into quite a bit of detail about things like passwords and everything else like that. But basically, there's a scheme, if you want to Google it, and there'll be some information in the guide that will be shared with you at the end. There is a scheme called the Cyber Security Essentials Scheme, the Cyber Essentials Scheme. And it's a government scheme that you might have heard of, and there are currently 222 companies that are listed on the IASME website. And IASME is like what Corgi is to gas boilers. IASME is to cyber security IT companies that are qualified. Go to one of those qualified security experts and get the best advice, so you don't maybe end up like me when I'm trying to select a good contractor. I rely on the Federation of Master Builders. You should maybe consider relying on the services of somebody that is Cyber Essentials certified. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen with you and take you through a very short presentation very quickly right now. Can you, Hayley, just give me the thumbs up and confirm that you can see that on screen, and then I'll jump into it. Fantastic. Thank you, Hayley. So the first thing, just a little bit about me, and this is just by means of introduction. I've been in the cybersecurity space now for the last 5-6 years, having started in technology and been in technology all of my life. Can I share with you just 3 numbers? Did you know that 1 in 5 small businesses will suffer a cyber breach this year? For me to bring that right up to date, while I have been speaking in this presentation to you for roughly 3 minutes, for every minute that I have been speaking, 18 companies in UK and Ireland have been successfully breached. Hackers are working right now. So that's 1 in 5 small businesses. It's a very real and present danger. Of those 1 in 5, 81% of those breaches happen to a small to medium-sized company. It's a company that is turning over less than 6 million. And so what small business owners tend to think is, why would somebody hack me? Why would they come after me? Surely they're going to go after a big airline, or they're going to go after a bank in order that they can rape and pillage and get a hold of credit card information and all kinds of banking funds. The reality of it is, what they want to steal from you is your identity and your information, and to lock up your data. So Hayley shared with us at the beginning of the presentation that 71% of you that are on this call right now have suffered a breach. The 71% of you have probably been subject to a phishing attack, or maybe had your data encrypted, and you had to reach out to a cybersecurity company in order for them to decrypt or roll back your data. 81% of that happens to small business. And the huge stat that Graham will talk to you about shortly in way more detail is that 97% of those breaches could have been prevented by implementing simple technology. And those are answered effectively if you go for Cyber Essentials accreditation and go through that process, which will cost your business roughly £300 to do it, and just reach out to companies like Nord IT, or Hayley will share with you a guide after the end of this presentation for you to go and address next steps in your business. So the cost to your business is going to affect you three ways should you be breached. The first way it's going to affect you is the loss of time, because it takes on average 54 days to recover data or to roll you back. Now, companies that are in insurance brokers like Graham's company will be great. They'll help pick up the bill, and they'll help the IT company come in and fix it. But you will be for 54 days, maybe without key information, access to your accounting system, so you can't bill people, access to banking, so you can't pay your suppliers. It's a huge, huge cost to your business. The second thing is under the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, that a lot of you went through over the last 18 months in particular. All of you are aware that you have to disclose if you have a breach. So in disclosing that, you run the risk of it being listed in a local paper, and the bigger your company, the greater that risk would be to your reputation. And then lastly, this is a research paper that was conducted by a big agency called Vanson Bourne. That's one of the biggest consulting companies in Europe. The average cost for a small to medium-sized business in just rolling back your technology and fixing it all. Now, this is conditional on the size of your business, right? Some of you have maybe got 50 user businesses, and maybe others of you have got 5 or 10 users. This is relative, and this is a mean average, but the average cost to those businesses is £13,800 of remediation costs. That is just the cybersecurity specialist bill, let alone the loss of business and everything else like that that will come your way. So in summary, as I draw to a close and I hand back to Hayley, working with the Federation, we have created for you a free members guide to phishing, which Graham is going to talk to you about in way more detail now over the strategies and the tactics that cyber hackers use in order to get at your business and get at your data. So the link will be sent to you from Hayley. From Hayley after this call. Feel free to download and share the guide with whoever you want. Share it with your team and your suppliers. And then the biggest thing that I would ask you to do is, as Hayley will challenge you at the end of this call, decide to take a next step today. Because please don't find yourself in the situation that I did. And let me finish where I started. It cost me a huge £3,500 back 10 years ago for a reputable builder to come in, and this was after I had spent a huge £22,000 on getting a conservatory built for my house. I had to go to a proper building contractor to get all of it fixed and done properly. So go to the best place to get the best advice, and the Federation of Master Builders and Hayley will direct you in that direction. So it's been my pleasure to share with you today. I'll now hand back to Hayley. Thank you, Hayley.
Great, thanks, Phil. And thank you very much for bigging up the role of the FMB in the construction sector and being the best place to go to find a really good quality builder as well. So that's brilliant. Yeah, as you've mentioned, we will be sharing that PDF document with everybody who's attending the webinar, and we will be posting it also in the members area of the website as well. So that's great. I think you've set the scene nicely, Phil, hopefully without frightening people too much, because there are ways that we can help them and protect their businesses from these threats. And I think Graham is now going to share his presentation with us, which, as you've said, goes into a bit more detail in some of those areas. So over to you, Graham.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hayley. Thank you, Phil. As you say, Hayley, I think Phil set the scene nicely there, leading into certainly what I'm going to talk about. But I think just touching on a couple of things that Phil's mentioned there, I think the important thing is there's certain things you can do to help yourself, but having made certain choices, such as the IT security company that you're going to get involved to set up your IT system or your computers or handle your data for you, another piece of the puzzle is going to be selecting some form of risk transfer mechanism like insurance. And the key things about insurance is, one, as Phil mentioned, it can pick up the bill, but also I think more importantly, it actually puts you closer to the relevant experts should the worst happen, should you suffer a cyber incident. So without further ado, I'll just launch into the presentation, see if I can share my screen. Bear with me. Hopefully, Hayley, you can give me the nod that that's showing on the screen.
Yeah, I can't see it yet, but sometimes it takes a second to pop up. I think it's on its way. Yeah, there we go.
Let's try that. Okay. So a couple of things that we'll try and touch on to give you a bit more of an awareness of this in the relatively short space of time that we've got, because it is a big topic, is we'll look to gain an awareness of some of the latest trends and background to cyber, because it really was a task to look at cyber as a holistic issue and come up with a solution where an insurance product could effectively help a customer in the event of a cyber incident. And that's important. I think any insurance product is going to be measured on the benefits of the claim service, i.e. how does it respond in the event of a claim, and that's going to be the critical thing. And we'll try and demonstrate some of that by looking at some of the drivers and looking at why businesses should consider cyber insurance, what it actually offers and how it works. We'll look at some claims examples, because that's the key thing. We could talk cover for a long time, what it covers, what it doesn't cover, but actually the best way to probably demonstrate that is just to show you some real life examples of claims that we've experienced. And then further on, we'll look to how cyber insurance can help businesses through that claims process. So just briefly by way of introduction, technology is great, but in fact, what it does do is introduce some vulnerabilities which can be exploited. Phil's touched on a few of them. Everybody's using technology, particularly if you're running a business. You're going to have computers, you're going to have customer data, you're going to use smartphones, you're going to use tablets. Everybody, adopts this technology, and it's great, offers many benefits, speed, and that's just the way the world works now. But unfortunately, it also introduces those vulnerabilities that can be exploited. So on the screen there, when we look to try and define what we mean by cyber risk, what is it exactly, and what are we talking about? Well, there's kind of a broad brush definition of it there, and any risk associated with that's going to come along with disruption and damage to your business, and maybe possible loss of reputation as a result of some sort of issue or failure with your computers, your data. Think of all the information you've got on there. There's customer data. Maybe you use a website to promote your business. And all these things are great, but actually, any sort of failure of that can result in some sort of disruption, maybe loss of income, cost to put right. And as we're saying on the screen there, there's two main parts to this. There's the overall cost to the business, and again, Phil touched on man hours spent trying to put these situations right should they happen. So things like getting information back onto computers, customer information, diaries, etc., whatever that may be, payment information, the information that you have to interact with your suppliers and your customers, it's all on there, and it's all pretty important and valuable stuff. So if something happens to that, that's quite a lot of disruption to the business, and obviously some reputational issues potentially there off the back of that. The other important aspect, and it is another area that insurance can really help, and that is the liability to third parties or the liability to others. Because of the amount of customer information and supplier information that you may handle in your day-to-day business activities, again, if something was to happen to that information, it gets into the wrong hands, it gets accessed in the wrong way by somebody that shouldn't have access to it, potentially that leaves you open to third-party action against you for failing to protect and secure that information. Who is it relevant for? I mean, one of the questions that get asked all the time is, who's it relevant for? Is it relevant for my business? Well, the simple fact is it's relevant to everybody. It's relevant to individuals. It's relevant to small businesses. It's relevant to mid-sized businesses and large businesses. It's relevant to everybody. And one of the important things is it brings you closer to specialist support. So quick, again, on the theme of, is it relevant to me? Do I need it? Well, if you can answer yes to any of these questions that are appearing on the screen, then yes, you should consider cyber insurance. It is relevant and it can help in the event of an issue. So just running through a few: do you handle data about your employees? Do you hold customer information? Start with, do you have a computer? Everybody's got a computer, everybody uses a smartphone, whatever it may be to run their business. That's the way of the world. You've got customer, supplier information on there. You interact with those customers using emails, websites, your bills, you send invoices, they pay those invoices. And these are all areas that are great. It's fantastic for your business to speed up things, but actually this does introduce some vulnerabilities that can be exploited. I'm not one for putting definitions on a screen, but actually I think some of these are quite useful. And obviously I think Hayley will make this presentation available after, so you can come back to this and have a look in a bit more detail, because these terms do get bandied around and sometimes it's good to just have a look at what we're actually talking about. So things like malware, malicious software, that can cause damage. So, we may know that as a virus that can cause damage to your systems and your data. A really common one, and we'll have a look at how this actually works in practice, is a man-in-the-middle attack. Basically, somebody sitting between, for example, buyer and seller that are communicating on email, or customer and supplier, or business and customer, whatever that situation is. But communicating via email introduces one of those vulnerabilities that potentially somebody can exploit. And somebody would sit on an account monitoring communications between two parties, and then may well use that to their advantage. And we'll take a look at how that's actually going to work. Statistics. Some statistics, just kind of following on from what Phil has already said, and statistics are great. The way I always look at these statistics is that you see a lot of them, they're always out there in the press. You might see headlines, but actually I wouldn't pay too much attention to the actual numbers, because they all vary. Whatever press you read or whatever information you get, the numbers vary wildly. But one thing is for sure, it is a big problem. People do fall victim to this stuff. Cybercrime, cyber risk is a challenge for everybody, and it's a case of trying to stay ahead. I mean, just look at some of the statistics there: 3.6 million fraud incidents in the last year. And cyber-enabled fraud makes up 70% of the overall reported frauds. Now, that's just quite telling that, it's no longer burglaries or the physical crime. Crime is essentially moved online, moved onto the internet. And that's where these vulnerabilities are introduced, and people fall victim to cybercrime and cyber issues. A quick look at some claims examples, and there's three main ones which I've chosen here. And we don't really need to go into vast detail about them, but the first one being a website breach. So in this incident, and this again may or may not be relevant to you, depending on the size of business and your business activities. But one thing I would say about any claims examples or any incident examples that you see, these incidents have the potential to happen for anybody, for any business, for any size. It's not just a problem for the big business, the large organization, the technology company. This is a problem for every business and every individual. So even if you see some big numbers on these in terms of the claims amount, or the amount of money claimed, or the amount of money to put the incident right, this could happen to anybody. It would just be scale that would be different in terms of, the smaller business, the smaller number, but the larger business you are, the more information you handle, the more payments you make, the more access to your bank accounts you have, etc., etc. So therefore, it's going to be scale that varies, but the incidents as they stand could occur in any business, could affect any business of any size, and any trade for that matter. So in the first example, a website breach, So somebody gained access to a website of an organization, a company, and inserted a fake payment page over theirs. And this fake payment page was then used to essentially harvest customer information. So everybody that came to that website were putting their details in, their card details, their information, and that information was being filtered out the back door and being gathered, obviously for various reasons, identity theft, fraud, whatever it may be. Now, from the company's perspective, whose website this was, that's a problem, because obviously there's a reputational issue, there's potential third-party liability issues, because they could be pursued, because if the vulnerability is proven to be their fault or they're negligent in any way, then that will come back to them. But it will also come back to them in the first instance, because the various, the card brand would be involved. They would investigate. They would look to the source of this potential breach, and it would all roads would lead back to this particular business and their website. So in this case, it's a lengthy investigation. There's disruption to the business. There's all the things that we've touched on already: loss of business income, investigations, data recovery, and that takes some expertise. So you have to get the right experts in. So forensic IT experts, maybe some legal advice around your obligations, etc. And that's important because in the event of a claim or an issue like this, where would you personally turn to? Would you start to look for somebody, or would you have, for example, an insurance product which would place you closer to these experts, and it's a 24/7 line which you can ring to get help, basically. The second example is similar: an email account breach, a phishing email. We've all heard of phishing. So an email comes in, somebody trusts a link on that email, clicks on it. That allows them to gain access to an email account, and in that you've got birth certificates, all sorts of private information, payment information, interaction with suppliers and service providers, etc., etc., etc. Again, a costly and time-consuming exercise to put right. The last one, and is certainly a very common occurrence, is a ransomware attack. And we'll take a look at what a screen might look like when you get one of these. But basically, this is some kind of malicious software, a virus, which hits your computer and then means you can't use it until you put in a password or a decryption key. And that, in theory, and that's the theory, and that's the important thing, sometimes it doesn't always work that way, but the theory is you would then be given the password to get into your system and get your information back. But in practice, hit and miss, I think, in terms of the way that works. But there's an example on the screen that was quite costly to an organization, and the names of these ransomware attacks vary, but the game is always the same in terms of the disruption to the business and the impact on the business and how it has to be put right. So looking at this practically, what you might be presented with one day when you open your computer, your laptop, to look at some emails, you might get a screen like that, which is appearing on the screen there. And they make it quite easy, but in terms of how you would go about paying these ransoms. So, they give you where to deposit the amount of ransom in Bitcoins or whatever the ransom demand is. And in theory, then having done that, you would be given a decryption key or password to get that information back. The next one, a common one, is the email account breach, how this actually happens. Now, I think we can all probably come up with an example where we've experienced this. I seem to get them 10 times a day, personally. But you may get a request from, it could be the Inland Revenue, it could be your Apple account, it could be your Microsoft account, or whatever it is, and it'll say, your account is going to be locked out. Please, can you verify your credentials? And what that means is click on this link and put in your login details. But unbeknown to the person that's doing this, this is a fraud. It looks legitimate. You can see on the screen there on the right hand side, it's an Office 365 or apparently an Office 365 login. And in theory, you would put your information in there and that would verify your credentials. But actually, what that's doing is giving your login details to whoever is carrying out this attack against you. Having gained access, you can imagine the kinds of information that are going to be in your email accounts, invoices from builders, for example, invoices from suppliers. You then pay that invoice based on the account details, i.e. it's the last thing you saw from that organization. You then trust that, go and pay that invoice, but unbeknown to you, the account details have been changed and that's gone off to a fraudster's account somewhere. The other thing is potentially to modify the auto forwarding rules in the email account so that every email that comes into that account, that goes off to a secondary account, i.e. the account of the fraudster, and they can see every email that you ever receive. In terms of the actual cover and the way an insurance policy would respond, the insurance policy, by design, takes on all of those situations and tries to come up with an effective solution, i.e. how can we help you, the business that suffered an incident like this? What are the types of things that we need to cover? What are the types of costs that we need to pay for based on how it's likely to impact on your business? Priority one is the claim service, I think, to get, to start the ball rolling in terms of working out what's happened and how it can be recovered and get your business back up and running quickly. Because as Phil suggested, the longer this goes on, the more it costs you and the more disruptive it is to your business. So nobody wants that. But the way it does it is to break it down into, I guess, manageable chunks, to look at the key areas. So, things like ransomware, viruses, you're going to have to get your computer back up and running. You're going to have to restore information to it. You may incur all sorts of additional expense to continue running your business whilst all this is going on. Secondly, you're looking at the crime aspect of it, the fraud, the ransom attack, the phishing scam, where there's a request for payment. You pay that based on information in your email system. Unbeknown to you, it's been hacked, it's been breached, and you're open to fraud incidents like the ones we've talked about with the the access to email accounts and the modification of information in there. The next one, you start to go into areas of dealing with data breach. Your obligations as a business are to, if you gather information about individuals, employees even, if it's a really small business, but certainly customers, that's personal information and you're obliged to protect that. And also, if it is breached, if it is accessed inappropriately by somebody else, then notify those customers, potentially notify regulators, and basically demonstrate that you're protecting and securing and managing the customer information effectively. That's one of the obligations that you've got as a business, and it's an ongoing obligation. Now, this is the area that starts to get into that in terms of if an account is breached, some customer data is lost. This will pay for the right expertise to investigate that, potentially notify those customers, notify any parties that are relevant, such as banks or whoever it might be that needs to be told. And lastly, the liability piece. So potentially because of things like breaches, or maybe your activity online on social media perhaps, and unintentionally you sort of damage somebody's reputation, or they claim that you've damaged their reputation as a result of your online activities through social media, for example, then this is the area that would pay for that. So somebody could come to you and demand compensation, damages as a result of that loss of reputation, or as a result of your alleged mishandling of personal information. And therefore, it needs to be investigated, they need to be notified, and those claims against you have to be investigated and defended, really. So further information available on the cover from the Federation, but briefly, the cover's available with certain limits, and these limits will depend on which limits you select will depend on, I guess, the size of your business, but further information available from the Federation on that. Very quickly, the claims process, it's quite simple, and the headlines are 24/7. You can notify a claim or certainly ring that line 24/7 if you suspect an incident, because that's the important thing. You might not always know, there might be some allegation, the system might be behaving strangely, you might think you've got a virus on it, you might have suspicious activity on your email account. It's potentially one of these incidents. So 24/7 claims line, you can report any sort of incident like that in there, and the ball starts rolling immediately. A call with you with a relevant expert to discuss the situation and basically assess what's occurred, what needs to happen next. And then obviously that continues, and there are experts there that can investigate legal issues, forensic IT issues, email account breaches, crime, fraud. They can get involved with banks' fraud teams, for example, to investigate the circumstances and work out what's actually going on. So it's important to notify it quickly, because the quicker you do that, the quicker, you know, it can be put right, and the less disruption there's going to be to your business ongoing. So that was a whistle-stop tour of cyber insurance and cyber cover. Any questions, feel free to ask them after this session, or indeed field them through afterwards. Thank you for listening.
That's great. Thanks, Graham. If I put all of us on the screen now, I have got a couple of questions to share with you. And just to reiterate what you just said, Graham, as well, I'll put in the follow-up email, I'll put details for FMB Insurance Services. If members need further information about policies that are available through yourselves, they can contact FMB Insurance for that. I was just thinking, as both of you were speaking, that what is the role for law enforcement in all of this? Because it sounds a little bit like the Wild West is happening out there in cyber land, but there doesn't seem to be a sheriff, really, from what I can see. It's all about private companies and IT companies and other people who can support members with these issues. But is there a law enforcement aspect to any of this? I don't know if either of you want to jump in with that.
I can certainly offer my view, and I couldn't put it better myself in terms of it is the Wild West. I think it's almost impossible to police. You know, the advice when you suffer, certainly if it's a crime, if it's fraud or something like that, is to report to the police and people like Action Fraud. And that helps really with statistics more than anything else. I think there are government entities that are set up for the fight against things like cybercrime, but I think, you know, honestly, I believe, as you say, I think it is the Wild West, and it's almost impossible to police. And you know, it's almost a losing battle. It's a constant battle to stay ahead of these risks, these situations. And where do you trace these individuals to? Where do you trace these fraudsters to? You know, they bounce around the internet and then they're gone, almost untraceable. I don't know whether Phil's got a view from a cyber security perspective, but certainly from my point of view, that's the way I see it.
You're on mute, Phil. That's it.
Yeah, great. Sorry, I was still in delegate mode there. Yeah, I think Graham has touched on one of the key points there, which is the internet is largely unregulated. A lot of us will be aware, probably the biggest internet scandal of recent years is probably the 2016 election in the US with Donald Trump and Russian interference. And all of us know that a UK company called Cambridge Analytica was caught up in all of that kind of fake news scandal. And we are still today trying to unpick the regulation of a largely unregulated space, because we can regulate air, we can regulate water and shipping paths and where we are, but stuff that's in cyberspace, it's geographically very difficult to lock down, because I am telling you that I'm speaking to you from my home in West Wales right now, but equally so I could be in Singapore, right? You don't know where I am. So the internet has that challenge with it, in that it's knows no geographic boundaries and it's unregulated. But the biggest challenge as well is, and I know it pains people to hear this sometimes, is a lot of this is scamming. It's people that are pretending to be someone else, and we get done through it and we get scammed, and then we're trying to have a system to bring recourse on us when we just got had. And so for example, I know lots of people every day, you know, transferring funds using man-in-the-middle attacks or intercept fraud that Graham has just referred to, that are transferring. I was with a builders merchants 6 weeks ago that had transferred 60,000 to Blue Circle Cement, or who they thought was Blue Circle Cement. Intercept fraud, change of bank account details. There is absolutely no recourse for that. It is a fraudulent transaction because somebody pretended to be Blue Circle Cement when they're not, but how do you track that down? So it's a very, very difficult space, even for law enforcement, to get involved, much like me and my the dwarf wall on my on my conservatory that I was referring to. To me, it looked like a great wall. It just, the water started pouring in because the lead flashing and everything wasn't done properly.
Well, I hope that wasn't done by a member of ours.
Not at all.
No, that's good. So I know that we've had a couple of members, at least that I'm aware of, in the past who've had instances of that invoice fraud in particular, where somebody's hacked into their email accounts and sent a fake invoice to their customer, who's then paid that. And there's two victims to that crime. There's the member themselves who hasn't received their payment, and the client who's paid, a fraudster, basically. So one piece of advice that we've sometimes given to our members is to advise them to maybe make a small test payment, or ask their clients to make a small test payment of £1 or £5 or something, to make sure that it's ending up in the bank account where it should be. Is that something that is worth our members advising clients to do, just to check that they're making the payment to the right people?
I'd be curious to hear Graham's response to this. What I'm a great advocate for is to run your business online in exactly the same way as you would run it offline. So most of us as business owners have got thresholds for financial transactions. You know, some people can get 20 quid from petty cash to do this, that and the other, no questions asked. If they need to go and get a pair of, I don't know, you know, a new helmet or something that's needed for safety purposes. And then we go to maybe give a manager more criteria that they can maybe sign off purchase orders for up to £1,000, £2,000. And then we get to another level where other people need to be involved. I encourage everybody with online transactions to do exactly the same, but to change it a little bit by saying, do you know what, for every transaction that's over £5,000, I'm just going to make a phone call and just confirm. And every time you make that monthly payroll run, just check, hey, we're going to make this payment to you this afternoon. Can I just confirm that your bank details are this? This is what we're going to use. And make sure that you've got the most up-to-date information. Because in my experience in construction, most people use the same suppliers, and there's maybe only 50 or 60 suppliers. So to do a payroll in an afternoon is maybe an afternoon of phone calling that you have to do over and above a certain limit. It really does minimize that blue circle cement £60,000 payment story for your business. So that's my our suggestions from a cybersecurity perspective.
Okay.
Absolutely, totally agree. I think the key thing is that this often relies on pressure. You know, we've said that before, that it relies on pressure. It relies on people being busy, you know, not to check things and check again. But unfortunately, I don't think there's any simple answer to that. And I know there's going to be a volume of, you know, there's emails in there that need responding to for quotes or whatever it is, or, you know, there's invoices that need paying, and you kind of trust what you see in front of you. But a quick 2-minute phone call to the business that you're, or the supplier that you're paying, or whatever it is, just to double check that, is probably the only way to be completely sure. And then couple that with trying to prevent, you know, these things happening in the first place, because obviously some of those things we've looked at there flow from the fact that somebody has gained access to an email account. So then you're into things like, well, change your passwords. You know, you hear it all the time, and you know, we all get kind of tired of hearing it. You know, don't have simple passwords, and change your passwords, and don't use the same passwords for every account and things like that. But it's just really about trying to be that bit more aware of it, and doing those types of things, I think. And then that'll help, hopefully, to prevent it from happening in the first place. But the key one there, you can see that, you know, the way those frauds work is to, you know, use the pressure and you know, modified invoices, for example. And the only sure way really is to ring the company and double check and make sure that they've got the account details right, because not just fraud, but they could also have made an error on that, which would be costly and difficult to sort out. So I think, you know, cyber security and you know, it's not about the complicated things, because everybody's always hears the word cyber and cyber risks and thinks, oh, this is far too complicated, this is way over my head. But actually, Phil's hit the nail on the head. Treat it like you handle your business offline or whatever, and just be generally aware of those types of things and the potential for it. You know, cybersecurity, you know, another statistic that again Phil's mentioned, you know, if you take the basic steps of, you know, passwords, you know, maybe antivirus software, you know, a bit of staff training on awareness, things like this, you could be in the top 10% of risks, i.e. the lowest risk to these types of incidents, because you've taken just the basic steps. You know, it's not, you know, to coin a phrase, it's not really rocket science. That it's about just taking those sort of basic steps and doing the very basic things can go a hell of a long way, I think.
And I think also making all of those phone calls, whether it's to your clients or your suppliers or whoever, can only enhance your reputation as a business that is really careful and cares about what they're doing and about their customers, etc. So it's no bad thing from that perspective either.
Absolutely.
Another question that's come up from members is, if you are the victim of a ransomware attack, should you ever pay the ransom?
How long have we got? I think this really divides opinion. All I can give you is my experience with this. I say no, because I understand both sides of this, that people want to get businesses back up and running straight away, and probably that seems like the quickest shortcut to doing that. But it does cause problems. It puts you on a vulnerability list going down the line, what I term a suckers list. You've already paid once, so you'll pay again. You know, so you're a target then, so you're a future target. It's a tricky one for insurers to deal with as well. Let's say, for example, it is insured. You know, we don't know where this money's going. We don't know who we're paying. We don't know whether it's funding terrorism. We've absolutely no idea, because it's almost untraceable. And it's a really tricky one to deal with. I believe the success rate, if you actually pay a ransom, do you get the information back? Hit and miss. So you may pay the ransom and not get the result you want. We haven't got a lot of time now to go into it, but all those things considered, my view is no. I think the route to go down is seeking the expertise, maybe looking into insurance as an example, you know, and this isn't a sales pitch. I'm just saying this is, you know, it's one part of the big picture to basically, you know, do the basic things yourself and look for different ways that you can help yourself. So having access to experts, for example, you know, changing your passwords. And one of the critical things from a ransomware point of view is they're holding your data to ransom. Now, if for example, you've backed up that data, you've got a backup of it, they can't hold you to ransom for anything, because all they've got is a computer with a virus on it, which you can literally throw away, get a new one and put your data back on there. Problem solved. You know, it sounds simplistic when you put it like that, but my view is, you know, take those steps first off, get the data backed up so you've got the information, consider insurance, change your passwords, just look at your whole sort of cyber, do a little cyber health check and take the basic information, take the cyber essentials as you don't even have to sign up for that. You can go and look at some of the things that it's telling you to do, and it's all good stuff in terms of risk management. So take the basic steps, protect yourself, and consider some of these things that we're talking about as one possible way to help.
Great. So I'm not a betting woman, but if I was, Phil, I'd bet that you would agree with that.
So I would say, look, the online world is the same as the offline world. Okay, so if somebody's kidnapped my children, am I going to pay the ransom? Well, that depends, right? Rockefeller didn't pay the ransom because it was going to be open season on him. But I tell you, my view is I'd pay the ransom. So I think for business owners and for me to give the best advice that I can, which I do every day in my role, is to say you need to decide as a business owner. Because if it means that you're employing thousands of people and you can get back up and running straight away, because, you know, the statistic, and this is an UK and Ireland statistic, 81% of people that have paid the ransom, it's actually 81.2 is the exact number, and this is from research that most of us have been doing around the 222 IASME cybersecurity certified companies that are out there. Their data was released. However, back to Graham's point, I better now remediate my network and make sure I don't get hacked again, because I have sent a clear message that I'll pay, and I'll pay again. So I think if you do decide to pay, please get yourself into the situation. And if I share the slide with you that I did right at the beginning, 97% of cyber breaches can be prevented from happening in the first place by taking simple, very simple steps around password protection and around looking out for lots of things that are coming your way. But I wouldn't tell anyone whether they should pay or shouldn't pay. That's a personal choice for them.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I think we're slightly over time actually, but we've had some really interesting discussions at the end there and some good questions. And so it just remains for me to say thank you so much to Graham and to Phil. Did you want to?
There's been a question from Sadie in the chat that she's been asking, can we purchase cyber cover via FMB insurance?
Yes. And I think Graham mentioned that in his presentation, actually, that was the case. And I will also put that information, the contact details for FMB Insurance in the follow-up email. So thanks for pointing that out, Phil. That's great. So yeah, thank you very much to both of our speakers for some really interesting and useful insights and expertise that they've shared with us there. Hopefully not too scary for everybody. I am just going to share a quick poll with the audience to see if we can get a feel for what people are planning to do as a result of attending today's webinar. So that is asking you about reading the guide that Phil referred to earlier about phishing, looking at the web links that we're going to send out in the follow-up email, and looking into your insurance options. I will leave that on the screen whilst I just wrap up the close of the webinar. So I need to flag up the next webinar that we're running for members, which will be on Tuesday, the 21st of July at the same time, when we're going to have a lawyer addressing contractual issues. We'll be doing a Q&A on how members can deal with the increased cost and time taken to complete works in the light of all the added safety measures that they're having to take because of coronavirus and the impact that that's having on their contracts as well. So that's Tuesday the 21st of July. So thank you for completing that poll, and I can see that everybody's going to read the Node IT. Well, half of you are going to read the Node IT Guide to Phishing, and nobody is going to take no further action. So that is great. That seems like a very wise plan. And as I said, we'll send you out the follow-up email with loads of further information in it, which I hope will be useful. Thanks again to our two speakers, and thank you very much to you for attending. And goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.